Before we dive into this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like the video, and leave a comment telling me what you would have done in this situation. Trust me, this story takes turns you won't expect, and it only gets more intense from here. My name is Alina. I'm 21 years old, and until recently, I lived a life that felt predictable, safe, ordinary. It was just me, my mom, and her new husband, Igor. He was 46, confident, composed, and observant in a way that sometimes made me feel like he could see straight through me. He wasn't my father. He never tried to replace one. But from the first day he moved in, he carried himself as if he had always belonged in our home. He was attentive, too attentive sometimes. Always offering help. Always lingering a second longer than necessary. His presence filled every room. At first, I convinced myself it was harmless. Maybe he was simply trying to build a connection. Maybe I was imagining the intensity in his gaze. But doubt has a way of growing in silence. And that doubt followed me until the night everything shifted. My mom had gone to stay with my grandmother for a few days. The house felt strangely hollow without her laughter drifting through the rooms. That evening, I stepped out of the shower, wrapping myself in nothing but a loose, oversized shirt. My hair was still damp, brushing cool against my shoulders as I walked down the hallway toward my bedroom. I thought Igor had already gone to bed. I was wrong. My bedroom door eased open with a quiet creak. I turned, startled, and there he stood in the doorway. His eyes moved slowly over me, not crude, not rushed, but deliberate. Calculated. "Aren't you cold?" he asked, his tone light but edged with something else. "It's warm," I replied, trying to sound casual even though my pulse had begun to race. He stepped inside slightly, leaning against the frame. "You might want to put something else on," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "You're making it hard to concentrate." My breath caught. I forced a small smile. "On what?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied me as if he were weighing a decision. Then he said quietly, "I thought you were still a girl, but I see now you're not." And just like that, he left. The silence he left behind was louder than any confession. My heart pounded as I closed the door, though not completely. Something inside me had awakened, something reckless and curious. I told myself it was wrong to feel that flicker of excitement, but denying it didn't make it disappear. The next morning, he behaved as if nothing had happened. He brewed coffee, set a plate of breakfast in front of me, and casually remarked, "You were up late." "How would you know?" I asked, lifting my cup. He met my eyes. Doors carry sound. There was a challenge hidden in his words. A silent acknowledgement that neither of us could ignore. The air between us thickened over the next few days. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was subtle. Fingertips brushing accidentally in the kitchen. Prolonged eye contact across the room. The unspoken understanding that something forbidden was unfolding. One evening, I wore the same oversized shirt again. I told myself it was coincidence. Deep down, I knew it wasn't. He was sitting at the table working on his laptop when I walked in. His eyes lifted, and I felt the weight of his attention instantly. "You like that shirt," he observed calmly. "It's comfortable," I replied. "Comfortable," he repeated, closing his laptop slowly. "Or intentional?" I stepped closer, leaning against the table. "Does it matter?" He stood, his height suddenly overwhelming in the small space. "It matters if you're playing a game." "And if I am?" His voice dropped. "Then you should know I don't lose." That night, the invisible line between us blurred completely. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't chaotic. It was quiet, almost inevitable. When he stepped into my room later, there were no jokes, no teasing words. Only honesty. "I can't pretend I don't feel this," he said softly. I didn't step back. What followed changed everything. Not because it was wild or scandalous, but because it was intimate. Intense. The kind of connection that feels less like a decision and more like surrendering to something that has been building for too long. The morning after was calm. Peaceful. As if the house itself had accepted the shift. "You're my secret now," he whispered as we stood in the kitchen. And I realized something startling. I didn't feel like a victim of circumstance. I felt chosen. Seen in a way I had never experienced before. Days turned into nights filled with quiet anticipation. Every glance across a room carried meaning. Every brush of his hand ignited sparks beneath my skin. But secrets don't live peacefully forever. One evening, he looked at me with a seriousness that silenced my racing thoughts. "We can't stay like this," he said. "Hiding." My heart skipped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying if this is real, we stop pretending it's not." The idea terrified me. It also thrilled me. Within a week, everything changed. He told my mother the truth. There was no shouting, no dramatic scene, just the quiet unraveling of a marriage that had never truly been built on passion. She left. The weight of that reality hit me harder than I expected. Guilt mingled with relief. Fear tangled with desire. But Igor stood firm beside me. "No more secrets," he said. "If we choose this, we choose it openly." We left town shortly after. A small seaside community became our fresh start. There no one knew our past. No one looked at us twice when we walked hand in hand along the shore. The ocean air felt like absolution. Like permission to begin again. He opened a small repair shop near the docks. I found work at a cafe overlooking the water. Our lives became simple. Morning coffee together, shared laughter in the evenings, long conversations under a sky painted with stars. Sometimes, I would catch him watching me with the same intensity from that first night. "Do you regret it?" I asked once. "Not for a second," he replied. "You weren't a mistake. You were clarity." What began as tension had evolved into something steadier. Not just desire, but companionship, partnership. At night, when the world was quiet, he would hold me close and whisper dreams of a future without shadows. A life defined not by how we began, but by how we chose to continue. Looking back, I realized the turning point wasn't the shirt. It wasn't the glances or the whispers in the hallway. It was the moment we stopped pretending we didn't understand what was happening between us. Some will judge. Some will never understand. But life rarely fits into neat definitions of right and wrong. Sometimes it's messy, complicated, human. And if you've made it this far, I want to know, what would you have done? Would you have walked away? Or would you have followed your heart into the unknown? If you're still watching, you already know something important. The ocean didn't fix everything. The new town didn't erase the past. And love doesn't cancel consequences. At first, our new life felt unreal. A small seaside town. Fresh air. No one asking questions. No one knowing our history. We walked hand in hand through streets where we were just another couple. But freedom felt different when it stopped being secret. There were no more whispers. No more locked doors. No more hiding. And somehow, that changed everything. The excitement that once felt electric started turning into something heavier, quieter, real. One evening while I was working at the cafe, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "I know where you are." My stomach dropped. I showed Igor that night. He brushed it off, blocked the number, said it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. 2 days later, she showed up. My mother. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't make a scene. She just looked at us. "I wanted to see if it was worth it," she said. I couldn't answer. Because suddenly, I didn't know. She left without drama. Without revenge. Without threats. And somehow that hurt more. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about passion or freedom. I was thinking about damage. "You regret it," Igor said quietly. "No. Y whisperat." But it didn't sound convincing. Even to me. The truth was complicated. I didn't regret him. But I started questioning the story we had built around us. Were we brave? Or were we just reckless? The tension slowly shifted. He became more protective. More watchful. If someone smiled at me too long, he noticed. If I came home late, he asked why. The man who promised freedom now feared losing control. One night during a storm, the power went out. Wind slammed against the windows. We argued in the dark. "You came to me," he said. "You invited me," I replied. Silence followed. And in that silence, something honest surfaced. We weren't heroes of some forbidden love story. We were two people who crossed a line, and now had to live with it. Weeks later, my mother sent me a message. I hope you know who you are without him. That sentence stayed with me. Who was I? Before the tension, before the rebellion, before the secrecy, I realized something uncomfortable. Part of what made everything intense was that it was forbidden. Without the risk, without the secrecy, what were we? When a job opportunity opened in another city, 6 months of training, real career growth, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Independence. When I told him, he looked stunned. You're leaving? For a while, I said. And us? If it's real, I replied. It survives distance. He didn't like that answer. But it was the only honest one. The night before I left, we sat on the beach watching the waves roll in. I don't regret loving you, he said. I don't regret it either, I answered. And that was the truth. But sometimes love isn't meant to be permanent. Sometimes it's meant to wake you up. 6 months later, I was living in a new city, working, growing, standing on my own feet. We still talk sometimes. But the intensity was gone. No more fire. No more danger. No more obsession. Just two people who once meant everything to each other. You sound different, he said once on the phone. I am, I replied. And I realized something important. What I thought was destiny was actually transformation. He wasn't my forever. He was my turning point. And maybe that's what some relationships are meant to be. Not a home, but a lesson. So tell me, was it love? Was it rebellion? Or was it just two lonely people mistaking intensity for fate? Comment what you think. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because sometimes the most complicated stories aren't about scandal. They're about growth.